First, the provincial election, and now those civic results. In both those contests, it wasn't easy to be an incumbent. There was a lot of change blowing in the wind. Regina and Saskatoon both have new mayors and a bunch of new councillors, and the influence of third parties was not as great as some had feared. For the latest, we've reached our political panel. Adam Hunter covers politics for CBC Saskatchewan, and Mandryk writes a political column in the Regina Leader-Post. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Adam, what's the new lay of the land in our big cities?
I think the big story is, you kind of touched on it there, is there's a lot of changes, a lot of new faces, new mayors all over Saskatchewan. Really, incumbents suffered heavy defeats, and this is something we've seen all across the world, the provinces, the country over the last number of months. And I think in Regina, a big surprise, Chad Bajitsky winning the mayoral race. People have asked me on election night and since, who is Chad? What's his story? How did this happen? Because all of the, I think, money was on Sandra Masters and Lori Bresciani to try and duke it out.
Literally, I think all of the money.
And they duked it out for second and third. And so this is something I think you have to go back to 2000 when Pat Fiacco won to see this sort of outsider win, knocking off sort of established candidates, and really people going like, wait a second, who is this? And from all we've heard is that, this campaign, Chad's campaign, was grassroots. It was word of mouth. It was a lot on social media, and it had a lot to do with people checking out his platform online, checking out his candidate videos, his interview with yourself and others, and liking what he had to say. And that's really all it took. And the thing that really stood out to me on election night, I was at Sandra Masters' headquarters, which I think was prepped for a party, and it didn't happen. Was when that first batch of results came out, there were the advance votes. Chad Bajitsky was in first, and fairly commandingly. And we have to remember in Regina, the advance votes were a week ago. And so that gives a lot of people time from last week to this week to go, oh, who'd you vote for? Oh, really? Why'd you vote for him? Okay. And then people are looking into it, and we had a bigger voter turnout. Obviously, still pretty bad as far as comparison.
More like 1 in 4 than instead of 1 in 5.
And I hate to see what would happen if we had 1 in 3. What would have happened at the polls? 2-hour waits, 3-hour waits. They weren't really. Didn't seem like they were prepared for just that small of an increase. Saskatoon had 35% turnout.
That is more than 1 in 3 people.
And they had people acclaimed. And so.
Oh wow.
That to me tells me there's something wrong going on with communication, going around with what people know about civic politics in Regina. People are very angry. I see the comments. I hear from people in the community, but maybe they don't know what their city and council do. And if they did, there'd be more people out voting. Well,
one problem, of course, is that these elections are way too close together, right? And the city asked the province to please move your provincial election, and they would not. So some people don't realize which election is happening, which one is happening right now, and what are my options to vote here?
And I think those are the ones that stay home. And I think Adam summed it up quite lovely, in a quite lovely way in terms of why there is a huge problem out there in terms of people not really understanding whose responsibilities were. I had the same experience, and you less than Adam about Chad Bajitsky and who he was and what he would vote for. He said the right things. And I'm fascinated by what Adam described as word-of-mouth campaign, where people can actually, in this modern social media age, get their message out, even in the face of a pretty focused campaign on dumping specific mayors and or councillors that we saw from Advanced Regina, Common Sense Regina. I truly believe that one day we're going to find out that this is vested interests, either political or business, specific business people pouring money into these groups to do so. I love the notion that one of the first things Bajitsky said is that let's get this out of our politics. I sincerely doubt that's in the interest of the Sask Party government and whatnot, because I think there are direct ties, or at least indirect ties, between people with common goals, interests, and the federal Conservatives, the Sask Party, wanting their candidate being elected. Didn't seem to work out terribly well. As a matter of fact, in some ways it probably worked out in the opposite way.
Might have backfired.
Kind of backfired because they weren't obviously in Regina satisfied with what Masters was doing, who was hardly a liberal liberal progressive candidate, although she tried to address some of those issues. They moved to Lori Bresciani, quite obviously, because that's whom Advanced Regina was absolutely benefiting, as it was Dan Rasevich, as it was other candidates that seemed to pretend that they had nothing to do with this whoever this program was being sponsored by, yet seemed to benefit from it. Yet you have somebody coming out of the blue who's running a social media campaign, to the best of any knowledge, didn't have any backing from anybody, but just won a good weird word of mouth campaign that you didn't think existed anymore. And that's actually kind of uplifting. And the fact that he seemed to have both the right answers on social programming and business programming, that's going to be really hard to do, Steph. I think we're moving to a new era where, as Adam said, people are angry and frustrated, but they really don't know what they're angry and frustrated about. They obviously don't like their taxes, but they don't like seeing homeless people, and they don't like seeing people in severe distress because of drug addictions and otherwise wandering in front of their hospitals and wandering in front of their city halls and other places, and want somebody to address that issue. I don't think that's an issue to be addressed, by the way, at the civic level, and that's where probably the problem lies. But I think they are saying out there that we need somebody that isn't partisan, that isn't political, and all these people that are trying to get their own partisan people elected for their own self-interest can go pound sand. I'm going to vote for who I want to, and that seems to be what happened last night.
Adam, what can you tell us about the official opposition in Carla Beck? We talked last week at this time about the new cabinet that the Premier built, and now the critics have been announced. What are we looking at?
Hey, we're doing our homework. I think Murray and I did a lot of homework, and yourself, to get into election night, and that seems like it was 2 months ago, although it was a couple weeks ago. Turned my brain back around to provincial politics.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that stands out to me is having 27 now official opposition members is just going to be so shocking to the government to see them sitting across. I just think that there's something that we're not prepared for and they're not prepared for. The opposition's probably not prepared for it either. Just the noise, as you guys know, having covered it when it was, almost
it was 30-28 or whatever,
yes.
Right? At one time?
Yep. It's going to be fun. It's going to be noisy.
But having to give out these critic positions in portfolios that we hadn't heard of because they didn't exist.
Right.
Because, Amira Conway or Alina Young were taking on 4 or 5. Trent Waterspoon was critic of 7 things. And now they're all getting spread to everyone. The one that really stood out to me was Brett Blakely, who's a rookie MLA, getting social services critic, which is a pretty big endorsement by Carla Beck to say, hey, I have a bunch of incumbents who have been here before, but I trust you with one of the biggest files. And it's going to be one that comes up time and again. Murray was talking about homelessness and drug addiction, and that's something that comes up almost every day in the legislature from the opposition. So most of the big high-profile ones have stuck with the same people. So Nicole Saar still on justice issues, Vicky Moat still on health, Matt Love still on education. But that one really stood out to me as Carla Beck kind of giving a big endorsement to one of her rookies saying, here you go, this is a big file.
What stood out to you?
Well, I think Adam summed it up quite well in terms of the numbers, all of a sudden the new critic portfolios popping out. And
what a relief for some of those candidates to share some of that work.
But I'm going to say this. I can't think of anything less important in the greater scheme of things than who gets critical assignment where, because no one remembers who the opposition critic is, and usually, except for a few notable exceptions, if they ever do form government, they get another job anyway. That tends to be the way. But I think you hit on a couple interesting points in terms of the noise that they're going to be able to create. Just having the research capacity and being able to, as individual MLAs, focus on that. If they're smart and can do their own research themselves in terms of delving into these areas, that's going to be significantly different. And it's going to be significantly different. Interestingly, do you know who the ag critic is in the NDP? So neither do I, and neither will anybody else by the end of this, because that's where they have to really focus on or develop a different path if they're going to go to that next level. And I don't see that actually happening yet. If you go through the numbers, and they came out this week in terms of the final numbers, so many places where the Sask party in rural Saskatchewan actually increased their vote. fascinating, like Weyburn, Estevan, Lloydminster, all through there, still massive, massive wins, notwithstanding the fact that they had the United Party and the Buffalo Party. That is the NDP's biggest problem right now, as opposed to pinning down the government on where, as a group of 14, they actually did a reasonably good job, particularly by the end of pinning down the government. Now, as you say, I laughed at the notion of what it was like when it was 28-30 because it was chaos. And I think we're going to return to a bit of that noise in the legislature. So a lot of the bullying and nonsense that we saw from Jeremy Harrison and others was based on the fact that he was dealing with a small and in many cases ill-prepared, ill-equipped group of opposition members that he could push around and other people could push around. Guess what's not going to happen this time? Smartest move I think Scott Moe made was trying to calm the waters by getting someone like Tim McLeod as government house leader and doing other things, because that's what they're going to need to do. They have their own problems with this big, huge, massive opposition right now, and they need to basically come across as more calm and reasonable. I think we're seeing that in some of the principles, although that's not going over terribly well with the far right. There again, wasn't a good night for the far right if you look at Arcan and other civic election things, was it? Whatever happened to Jeremy Harrison said, go elect, or Jeremy Cockrell basically saying, if you're concerned about school board issues, go get your candidate elected. Well, apparently they couldn't.
Thanks, you guys.
You're welcome.
That is Adam Hunter, who covers politics for CBC Saskatchewan, and Murray Mandryk, who writes a political column in the Regina Leader-Post.